Good evening, everyone. So today I'm gonna explain about aggregate supply. So aggregate supply is pretty simple concept when it comes to the short run, and when it comes to the long run, we have to study a little more um, extra, especially when it comes to the classicals and Keynesian. So two different approaches are there in aggregate supply. So unlike aggregate demand, aggregate supply is a little bit complicated, but it is an interesting topic. All right. So first of all, we'll talk about the definition of aggregate supply. What is aggregate supply? I hope you all are aware about aggregate demand, right? Okay. So aggregate supply AS, we can call AS, is the total planned output of goods and services that businesses within an economy are willing and able to supply or able to produce at a given general price level at given time period. So very important to note given price level and given time. Okay, so when we drawing the aggregate supply curve, whether it is short run, whether it is long run, we have to carefully denote the x-axis and y-axis. So on x-axis, we have to take the real GDP, and on y-axis, we have to take general price level. So when we discussing about individual supply curve, we usually denote price on y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. So instead of price, when it comes to the aggregate supply, we'll take general price level. Instead of quantity, when it comes to the aggregate supply, we'll take real GDP. That means the nation's entire output. Okay, so we can categorize the aggregate supply curve into the short run and long run. I think I already mentioned that. Okay, so we'll go to the short run aggregate supply curve. So this is a pretty simple idea, short run aggregate supply curve. So the definition of short run aggregate supply curve, SRAS, is the relationship between planned national output, which means GDP, and general price level. So what is the difference between the long run and short run? So when it comes to the short run, some factors are constant. When it comes to the long run, all the factors are variable. There is no fixed factors in the long run. So this is the one and only difference in the short run and the long run. Okay, so we are assuming the productivity, cost of production, and state of technology is constant in short run when drawing SRIs. So when we discussing about the long run aggregate supply curve, we are not taking these factors as constant. Everything is variable. Everything is taking consideration into the long run. Okay, but when we discussing about the short run, we have to take some factors constant. We want to assume some factors constant. So that factors are cost of production and state of technology and productivity. So we are assuming these factors are constant, then only the relationship between the real GDP and the on y-axis general price level will be a positive. Okay, I'll show you the relationship. Okay, we are taking real GDP on x-axis and general price level on y-axis. So how to draw, if it is a positive relation, how to draw the graph? Okay, is it negative? Is it positive? Okay, so a positive straight line is looking like this. I'm sorry. Yeah, like this. Okay, so we can name this as SRAS, shorten aggregate supply curve. Looking like this, we already assume that cost of production and state of technology, level of productivity is constant. Only prices is changing. Based on the price change, the quantity, the real GDP will vary. It's a positive variation. When general price level is increasing, real GDP also increasing under the assumption. Under assumption means the productivity and general technology, state of technology, and the level of productivity and cost of production is constant. So we're keeping that assumption, then only this relationship will work. Okay. So yeah, this is short-term aggregate supply curve. Its positive relationship is there between general price level and real GDP. Why this positive relationship? Why this aggregate supply is a straight line? So looking at a straight line which is positively slope. Okay, if general price level is increasing, how why the real GDP is increasing? Okay, so we look at here. Okay, when rising demand and price stimulates, okay, that will causes expansion of supply. So look at here, the price level increased. Okay, if price level increase, that is actually causing the increase of the real GDP, which means if general price level of the nation is increasing, which means inflation happens, what happens? The producers also willing to supply more. Why? If demand is increasing, because of the price is increasing, that means the profit motive. Okay, if profit maximization objective is there for it, if okay, we are assuming the producers are profit maximizes, so the profit maximizers, okay, profit maximizing producer will think, okay, this is a better opportunity to produce more because economy is offering better price. Okay, so better price means they incentive to produce will increase. Okay, so that's why here look at the graph. GPL1 increases to GPL2, price level increases, general price level increases, which actually increase the general, okay, real GDP of economy. So that is the relationship. Okay, if general price level increases, real GDP increases. So here from this point to this point, our supply is shifted. Okay, supply is moved. Okay, we'll use we'll call mood. Okay, supply is moved. Okay, because of the changes in price level, supply moved forward, which means extension happened. So this is known as extension. Because of the extension, Y1 changed to Y2, which means the real GDP increase. So same thing happens when the price level decreases. Okay, so if price level decreases from GLP1 to GLP2. Okay, so GLP1 to GLP3. So Y2. Okay, GLP1 to GLP3. So price level decreases, general price level of economy decreases. What happens here? Look at here, the movement. Okay, again one movement happened. That means the real GDP Y1 is reduced to Y3. So general price level in the economy reduces because especially the producers do not have interest to produce further. So they'll reduce the production. The total supply of the economy is reducing, so this is known as contraction. So both extension and contraction happens because of the changes in general price level. Clear? All right. So a fall in general price level usually leads to contraction of short-term aggregate supply as producers cut back production if demand and price are falling. All right. So falling demand causes contraction of supply. Again, so shorten aggregate supply curve contraction. We discussed about the contraction. We discussed about the extension. So next we want to discuss about the shift in shorten aggregate supply curve. So now, so far we are only discussing about shorten aggregate supply curve. So shorten aggregate supply curve because of the change in general price level, extension and contraction is happening because of changing some other factors. Okay, some other factors which is influencing the shorten aggregate supply curve. There are, like, other than price, there are some other factors which is also influencing the shorten aggregate supply curve. So if any changes happens in these factors, this can shift the entire short-run aggregate supply curve. So here we are actually already we discussed about the shift, okay, movement. So now we want to talk about the shift in short-run aggregate supply curve. So look at here. So the price is GPL1. We are assuming the price is not changing. Okay, but okay, so for example, cost of production. Cost of production is affecting the short-run aggregate supply curve. If any changes happening to the short-run aggregate supply curve, what will happen? For example, short-run aggregate supply curve increased, which means the cost of production is increased. Okay, short-run aggregate supply curve is shifting leftward because of the increasing cost of production. So look at here, short-run aggregate supply curve SRAS1 shifting to the SRAS2, which means it shifted backward. Because of that, the output of the economy, the real GDP of the economy decreases from Y1 to Y2. Clear? Okay, why the real GDP is decreased? Why the supply decreased? Because of the increasing cost of production. So I already mentioned there are some other factors which is also influencing the short and aggregate supply other than price. So in this case, we are taking price as constant. GPL is not changing, price is not changing. So in this time, some other factor like cost of production is decrease, which is also like cost of production increase, which is also decrease the SRAS1. So increasing cost of production actually disturb the production. That's why the supply is decreasing. Okay, so that is about the increasing cost. Then outward shift in short and aggregate supply. Okay, so SRS1 shifted into SRS3. So look at here, SRAS1, which is shifting to SRAS3. What happening to the output? What happening to the real GDP? Real GDP Y1 shifted to the Y3. So real GDP increased, which means supply increased, the total output of the economy increased, the real GDP also increased. So that's why SRAS3, SRAS1 shifted to SRAS3. So there are some factors which is influencing. We already influencing SRAS, which is including cost of production, productivity, and level of technology. So any one factor can shift the SRAS3 forward. So for example, if cost of production, okay, if cost of production is reduced, okay, cost of production reduced means the company will get more profit, the producer will get more profit. That means they will incentivize to produce more, so that can shift SRAS into forward. So I hope it is clear. This is very general idea about SRAS. Okay, so shift in short-run aggregate supply curve. So we already discussed about that. So we'll discuss in detail what are the factors which is causing shift in SRIs. So the first one is cost of production. So any businesses, any production unit, if their cost of production is increases, of course their supply will disrupt. Their supply will reduce. If their cost of production is less, for example, government is giving subsidy, so for the businesses, okay, so that businesses get a subsidy means their cost of production will reduce. They can easily get more profit because half of their cost, like some of the portion of their cost is bared by the government. So that can lead to more profit for that firm. So their supply will increase. They'll produce more because they are getting an incentive. They're getting a support from the government. So their cost of production is reducing. Their supply will increase. So that's why the cost of production is an important factor which is shifting, which is causing, which is influencing the short-run aggregate supply curve. So I'll give you some examples. Okay. So first of all, stronger UK pound versus US dollar from 1 is equal to 1.20 to 1 pound is equal to dollar 1.50, which means what happened here initially UK pound for getting 1 UK for purchasing 1 point by sorry for by using 1 pound they can purchase around $1.2. Now what happened by using 1 pound they can purchase $1.5, which means their value of currency that is become more stronger, the currency appreciated. So how this change in exchange rate gonna affect on the unit cost? Can you tell me? Okay, so unit cost will increase or decrease? Unit cost will, all right. So unit cost will fall because their currency become more stronger. They can easily purchase goods and services from outside. Their import become more cheaper. So in that sense, unit cost will fall. So if unit cost will fall, what happens to the aggregate supply, shorten aggregate supply? Shorten aggregate supply, shift outward more supply. Yes. Next one, government increasing national minimum wage by 10%. So national minimum wage means the government like government requirement, government mandatorily like increase, okay, deliberately government forcefully increasing the wage. Okay, so businesses cost of production will increase or decrease in this time? businesses cost of production will increase because government is making by law you have to, for the businesses you have to give the this much minimum wage, which means the businesses cost of production is increasing by providing higher wages, though that means their unit cost will increase. If their unit cost will increase, the total supply, their supply, of course their supply will be disrupted, it will decrease. Unit cost rise, inward shift in SRAS. Supply will shift inward left side, which means supply decrease. Then another one, government increases national minimum wage by 4% and labor productivity rises by 10%. So this is two events occur together. So the government increases national minimum wage means again the cost of operation of businesses is increasing because they have to pay higher wages. At the same time, the labor productivity is rises 10%. So labor productivity rises means cost of production will decrease because per unit output is increasing, right? So the even labor productivity rises by 10% is more than that of the government increasing national minimum. That is just 4%, right? So what happened? So cost of production will decrease, and what happened? Outward shift of SRAs. Again, the UK leaves European Union without a trade deal, and UK imposes average tariff on 11% of European Union imports. So tariff. So what do you think about if tariff, 11% of tariff can increase the cost of production or decrease the cost of production? How it gonna affect on the aggregate supply curve? Any guess? So what is tariff? It's a trade restriction, right? It's a trade protection measures. Like I think you all heard about the recent trade war happening between China and US. All right. So the 11% of European Union, like the tariff for the tariff against the European Union import means the cost of production will increase, right? So what happened then? That can disrupt the production, that can reduce the supply. So inward shift in SRAS. Then government cut subsidy. So that is just opposite of the tax, right? Subsidy, I already mentioned subsidy is a support. If government reducing, government cutting subsidy means it can increase the cost of production. Finally, it can reduce the supply. Then last one, the global prices of raw materials. You know, for the businesses, raw material is how much essential. Okay, so whatever the business is, raw material is the essential thing. If price of raw materials increase, what happens? Of course, the cost of production increases. If cost of production increases, they have to reduce their supply. That can shift the aggregate supply curve to the leftward. I hope it's just clear. So from this table, you can identify what are the factors which is actually shifting the short-term aggregate supply curve. So from the first point, you can understand that is exchange rate. Exchange rate can affect the short-term aggregate supply curve. Then government increase in national minimum wage. So minimum wage, okay, that can also affect the short-term aggregate supply curve. Then government increases national minimum wage and labor productivity. Labor productivity can affect the short-term aggregate supply curve. Then tariff. Tariff can increase the cost of production. Of course, it can affect the aggregate supply curve. Then government subsidy. If government provides subsidy that will improve the SRAs, government cut down the subsidy that can shift left toward the SRAs. Finally, the raw material prices that can directly affect the cost of production. So of course, that is also influence the short-run aggregate supply curve. I hope it is clear what is short-run aggregate supply curve. And I also mentioned about the long-run aggregate supply curve, but now I'm not talking about the long-run aggregate supply curve and the extension and contraction of short-run aggregate supply curve. Then we discussed about the shift in aggregate supply curve and what are the factors which is actually shifting the short-run aggregate supply curve. So this much things we discussed in this video. So if you have any doubt, just ask me and we'll discuss further. Thank you.